Argentina would rely heavily on their Spanish-based striker Mario Kempes, as they were regarded more as outsiders than as one of the favourites. The deceptive Kempes' all-round performance almost single-handedly guided Argentina through the early rounds.
Mario Alberto Kempes Owino, one of the greatest players of all time from Argentina, who mesmerized in the 1978 FIFA World Cup to become the tournament's top scorer. Kenya's Sammy Kempes Owino, who adopted that name after mesmerizing with the ball in Kenyan football in the 70s and 80s.
I got my nickname from him because of the Argentina won the World Cup in '78, and at the time I was playing for Gor Mahia, so the fans give you the name and it sticks, and that's how I ended up getting the name. I think Argentina won the World Cup, and he was the top scorer of that World Cup, so I ended up getting the name stuck, and then people recognize me as Kempes more so than my real name, but that's the nature of football, at least it was then.
The midfielder grew up in Ziwani, where he learned to juggle different sports in social halls and grounds that served the community well those days.
With the way we grew up in Ziwani those days, we had Kariako Hall. So those days, most of the estates like Ziwani, had a place where kids would go, or the community would go, mostly young people, and you either had boxing, football, badminton, so there were different kinds of games. There was a TV where we'd all go there, and I think it was a great thing. So I started boxing. We would play boxing, badminton, and football actually was played at a different location. It was just football you had to play football. So I did all three of them, and actually for a moment did boxing up to a certain level. But then football was my real love.
His passion was however in football, despite his parents' persistent efforts to push him to focus on his education, which they found more rewarding.
I just had a passion for it from the very beginning, something that I fell in love with. I can't tell you why, but it's just, the three I decided, and I just loved it so much that it got me in a lot of trouble. My mind grew up in a generation where they saw players that had gone into alcohol and were drinking and were womanizing, and that was their mind. That's what they saw, and they imagined that for me. And so they did everything they could to stop me from playing, because that was the idea of a player. And I used to tell my mom, Mom, when you are playing, there's a lot of booze, there's a lot of women, but there's a lot of great people you meet. People give you jobs. You pick which ones you want to go. You can go and go one way, or you can go another way. Lots of doors were open for me because I got jobs that people couldn't get. Post office gave me a house. I was thrown in the front line because of football. I met presidents. I met ministers. So I got jobs that I couldn't have gotten. Those were because I was a football player.
Little did they know their son would one day make his name out of football, just like so many other people he idolized.
Ziwani was a middle-class neighborhood. I don't know if you know, Tomboya lived there as well. And so when we grew up, it was a rebel. I mean, they still had those issues. I know we call it mtaa, but the reality is, if you look at the way most estates were then, the way the government was run, they took care of the estates, garbages were collected on time, the grass was cut, the houses were painted, and it was more of a middle class neighborhood. And so for me, my childhood was a very safe, happy childhood. And so my recollection is a lot of people who I think ended up being very successful, from Ziwani. And my memories of childhood were, playing in the neighborhoods. I had very strict parents. My mom mostly was in the village. My dad worked mostly, and when it came to football, and even to some extent boxing, we had a lot of players that ended up playing at a high level. For me, the players that inspired me, the one that kind of stuck out for me was Charles Oching. He was a very, very good player and made it at the highest level, and was one of the best players in the country. And because he's a player that I occasionally played with and I saw every day, it made that dream possible. And so for me, I said, okay, if this guy can make it to that level, so can I. It was very inspiring to see a player like that made it. But there were so many other players. Agre Lukoya was from Umeme. We had, there's another player called Sammy Owino. He had the same name. It's actually a relative of mine. And then, Mbogush, there's another player called Mbogush who ended up playing for the Union as well. So there were a lot of players that came from Ziwani and ended up playing at the top level.
He found his niche at an early age at the Olympic Youth Centers that were run by German Bernard Zigol.
I happened to be picked at a very early age. When I was, I think I was even 12 or 14 years old, I was picked for a program called the Olympic Youth Center. This was a program started by the German, I think it was a collaboration between the German government and the Kenya government, and they brought in a very qualified coach, and they picked players from different parts of the country. And in Nairobi, I was one of those picked to be part of that program. So that was at a very early age, and that really helped me a lot in terms of developing my play.
Sammy Kempes was later poached by Umeme, Reunion and Luo Union when he proved himself.
I was called to play for Umeme at a very early age. I remember, honestly, at the age of 14, me playing for the senior team. Then at the age of 17, I was recruited to go play for Luo Union. So there's obviously people that, because of the reputation of Umeme, would come and look at players. They looked at it as a place where they recruited players. So I played for Umeme at 17, and that same year I got recruited to play for Luo Union. And then from there I went to Gor Mahia. But the recruitment was with Umeme more so than school. Yeah.
But the mighty Gor Mahia weren't convinced until he faced them in a tournament where he was made to pay for it, but warmed himself into their hearts as well.
Gor Mahia was not my first team. So actually my tryout, prior to playing for the Union, I had gone for a tryout with Gor Mahia. So I went to practice there, and I remember Lantigo liking me, but they never were interested. I was extremely young at the time, so they, he said good things about me, but they never were interested. Gor Mahia was known for picking players that were already established. So number one, I was very young and I was not known at the time. So they liked me, but there was no feedback. Then Luo Union, some Steve Yongo, those who remember Steve Yongo, he was a national team coach and also a very good player with Luo Union. And there's another player of Luo Union called Peter Uma. He also played for Gor Mahia. Very good player. He liked me a lot, recommended me to Steve Yongo. And Steve Yongo came and looked at me. I remember meeting both of them, and they told me that they really wanted me to go play for Luo Union. And so I ended up playing for Luo Union. But the first team I played for, they recruited me for, was a Nairobi province team. So at the time, there were top players who play for provincial teams, and Nairobi was one of them. And I ended up playing for Nairobi. And what inspired me a lot was when I was playing with all these star players, players that I had looked up to, and at halftime, Yongo saying, "Why don't you guys play as well as him?" And I'm looking around me, I'm saying, this is crazy, because a lot of those players were my idol growing up. So that really was a huge motivation for me. But Gor Mahia, after I played for the Nairobi province, I went and played for Luo Union in the Eastern Central Club Championship. So they liked me. I was a starting player, and before we went to the tournament, we played against Gor Mahia. And I was so determined because they had turned me down, right? So I was so determined to prove that I was good enough, and I played so well. And actually, at some point in the game, one of those players tackled me so hard because he was not happy that I dribbled him, that the game had to be stopped, and they ended the game. But after that, I was able to meet Alan Thigo, and the player's name was Andrew Obunga, the late Andrew Obunga. And they said they liked me, and we started talking about me being, them liking me and all that stuff. And then after Eastern Central, they ended up recruiting me, and that's how I ended up playing for them.
And there was no turning back as he became a regular and standout player who was instrumental in their campaigns home and away.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate, I think, in the sense that, the teams that I played for was from the very beginning I was a starting player. The exception was Gor Mahia. So when I started playing for Gor Mahia, Alantigo was playing the same position as I was, and he was a legend, obviously. But to his credit, and I owe a lot to him, he started giving me minutes ahead of him. So he'd let me play, and then what would happen was, you know, the fans would chant his name, and then it would come in, and then I'd be taken out. And then what happened is, after a couple of games, I started playing well. And so so the fans would chant his name for him to come in, but when I came out, the fans would start complaining because they felt like somebody else needed to come out. And so Tigo encouraged me a lot. You know, he gave me his number. I was the first person that used his jersey number. He never used to give it to anybody. So I owe a lot to him. I still communicate with him up to now. And again, he's not feeling well, by the way. He's sick, and just want to, again, on behalf of Kenyans, just let him know how much we appreciate him, and personally for me, I really appreciate what he did for me personally and what he meant for me. But in terms of my highlights, obviously playing in the Eastern Central Club Championship, but I was the youngest player in the tournament. That was the highlight that was a big highlight for me. The other one was obviously winning Eastern Central Club Championship twice with Gor Mahia. That was highlight. We won the Eastern Central Championship with the national team as well. That was a highlight for me. I was injured at the time. I didn't get to play, but that was a highlight for me. But I remember going to the finals of the African Cup Winners' Cup and playing against Canon Sportif of Yaoundé. To me, even though we didn't win, it was a tremendous accomplishment or achievement. And that to me stands out, even though we did not win it, even though the finals we didn't do as well. But just getting there and being able to perform at that level was, to me, the great. And the games leading up to that, I was very pivotal in those games. I was a key player for Gor Mahia. And then even in the Eastern Central Club Championship, I think the only time that I didn't play as much was when I joined Gor Mahia, but after that I was a regular player. So I was pivotal player in all the major tournaments that we played, and I played a big role in them.
He also had some memorable moments with the national soccer team, starting with his debut that was not to be, as Kenya was thrown into mourning.
I was called to the national team in 1970. I was barely 18 years old, and we were supposed to go to South Korea, and I think Brazil was invited in that tournament. Germany was invited, South Korea, and a couple. And we were very fortunate, so we were really looking forward to going. And the late Niva invited me to the national team. Niva was one of the coaches at the Olympic Youth Center, and so invited me, and we were practicing, and then the late Jomo Kenyatta passed away, and so the trip was cancelled as a result. So that was my first call-up, and then after that, I ended up going for my A-levels, and I had to drop from the national team because of school, and then I rejoined the national team later on when I was 20. My next game was I was 20 years old. 2 years later
But at least there were other moments that he managed to register.
And I remember playing my first game and scoring 2 goals in my first game in a continental tournament against Tanzania. So that sticks in my memory quite a bit. Being your first game, scoring 2 goals, and you're very young, and they were incredible goals. And so that to me kind of is my highlight of my national team. And there were other games, but that one sticks out quite a bit.
The pivotal player later got an opportunity to further his studies abroad, just as his parents had desired, and they gave it all to ensure he did just that.
When I was around 22, somebody came and talked to me about an opportunity to go for academic studies and football in the United States. For me, education was very important, especially for my parents. It was very, very important. I had actually come from a tryouts in Dubai, and that opportunity came up, and it was a no-brainer, because when those days when I was in when I was, I don't know if you all remember, there's only one university, and that was Nairobi University. There was no, now you have all kinds of, so getting to the university was very difficult because there was only one place you could go. Students could go to Makerere in Tanzania as well, and Makerere University of Tanzania, but the reality of it, most of the students were vying for very few spots, and it was difficult. So I obviously didn't make it. I did well, but not good enough to make it. And what made it even more difficult was that I wanted to do engineering, and I wasn't able to make it. So when this opportunity came, I was given the opportunity to go up overseas and do engineering and continue to further my education. And for me and my family, it was a no-brainer. I just had to go. And so I talked to my parents, everybody was excited. And the thing that sticks out to me or even more and gives me a real appreciation of my parents is because my dad, you know, at the time I was having an issue raising the money for the aeroplane ticket. It was very expensive, and my dad took all his savings and gave them to me so that I would go to school. So it always, you know, that meant a lot to me. I just remember him giving me the money, realizing that was all the money he had saved for his family. So so now from there I had the opportunity to go to the US. That's when I ended up there.
He managed to play for his club in college as well as pursue his love for engineering before he crossed over to football management.
So over there I obviously played football for college, did my engineering. My plan was to come back. So I graduated very quickly, and because most of what they were doing at the freshman, sophomore year in the sciences were things that I'd done at my A level. So I was, you know, it was easier for me. I could overload in my hours. So I graduated in 2.5 years. I was supposed to come back and play for Gor Mahia. They actually had sent me ticket and some money for me to go, and they didn't even set up a job. And then at the time I was, I had a teacher that became a good friend of mine, and I told him that I was leaving, and he called me and said, "Why are you leaving?" And I explained it to him. The following morning he called me back again for a meeting, and he said, "You know, I have a friend of mine who has a company, and I think you're a very bright student, you know, can I talk to him? He's willing to give you a job." And I said, "You know what, he's also willing to pay for your master's." Yeah. So I had to call Gor Mahia and say, "You know, I don't think I'm coming."
But it wasn't all rosy, as he faced a lot of challenges that are not closer to many young Africans or blacks in the USA.
Challenges there are just as hard, if not harder, than challenges here. You know, people think that it's easier there. It's not. It's very difficult, especially if you're a black person. You meet challenges that you don't face here.
Sammy Kempes took it all in stride as he had a future to secure, and in the end he was able to achieve what he desired.
And so I think it's important for us to continue to remind young people that when you start playing, especially when you are valued as a player, use that opportunity to build your future. And that's kind of what I did. Is you know, I went in there and I built my future. After my education, my focus was life after football. So even though I was still very young, I was around 26, but for me I had made my decision. I was going to focus on building my future and my career, and that's what I did. I focused on, you know, getting a good job. So I actually had somebody had asked me at the time. We used to get a bunch of players that played together, and one of the players from Ivory Coast ended up getting a scholarship not a scholarship, a professional contract in France, and he was getting a lot of money. So the same person that recruited him came to me and said, "I think you're a good player. I think we've recruited him. I think you can make it there." But at the time, my mind was made up. I decided I just wanted to focus on my future and what I was going to do. Because for me, I had played at a very high level. There was nothing more to play for. I played that for the national team. I didn't see anything that was there that I could go back to. And so that's kind of what I decided.
He's picked a lot of lessons along the way and advises the current generation to take advantage of the opportunities they have while they're still active, as they will come in handy after football when the fame is over.
You have more opportunities when you're still playing. So I think, number one, I'd like to tell players, take advantage of that time that you're playing, because that's when the opportunities are there. For those players that are playing, we as a federation needs to establish an educational program that creates an awareness. And that awareness is an awareness that football is going to end. Create an awareness and educate them of their mortality as a football player. And let them know that football will be over and that they need to start to think about what they're going to do after football. And then what you need to do is to provide financial education for them, because it's very important for them to understand what does it mean financially to start a business. What are you going to do beyond football? So this is what finances mean. In the end, this is how finances are going to work. So provide financial education for them. The other thing is to me, I think it's important for them to start I call it a football retirement fund. So you cannot make it mandatory, obviously, but I think what you can tell them is you can educate them on the value of that and say, look, we have this fund that it's your fund, nobody can touch it except you, but you have to commit to not touching it for so many years until you retire. And it's going to take X number of dollars from your allowances or from your salaries, and it's going to go to that. And it's going to earn interest. We've invested in something that earns interest. And so at the end of their career, they're educated about finances, they have money, and they have an opportunity. You cannot team up with investment companies or organizations or whatever you call them, that now they can invest in and then go beyond that.
Education is still the key to attaining many goals, as it never stops, and he urges the players and retirees as well to go for training so as to fall back into management or coaching.
Education of the players is important in terms of their future. Financial education is important. A savings plan is important, and then training programs for them that they can join as they are playing football or after football. And beyond that also is I've made not most of my money. I made my money as an engineer, obviously, and in the software development world. But a lot of my money is made in football. Like right now, coaches, you can hire football as an administrator, a coach. There's opportunities within football that they can exploit. And basically what you can do is to train them. So you don't become a coach just because you're a football player. You become a coach because you train to be a coach. So I think players need to understand that being a good football player doesn't make you a good coach. Very different. I learned that the hard way. You have to go through the training. You have to go through the training of management. Totally different. But being a football player gives you an understanding that somebody else does not have. And so we need to educate our players and give them the opportunity to be trained in these areas. So when they retire, now they have coaching licenses, they have football management licenses. So we can provide those opportunities for them within our football community for them to move forward beyond that. So that's the players that are playing. The players that have retired, I think we need to honor them a lot. They are true legends of soccer, like Alan Tigo, the late Joe Kadenge, people like Steve Yongo, Bobby Ogola, people who truly contributed to their clubs and the national team for a long period of time, and who gave so much to the country. And I think those people need to be honored. For me, those legends need to be able to come to every game, any game, wherever they want, and get into a stadium without anybody questioning them.
The Football Administration also has a role to play to educate our players, create awareness programs, provide trainings, opportunities, as well as reward schemes for past players, most of them who are languishing in poverty.
The same thing that some of the things that apply to the other players also need to apply to them, which is that there is an education process that need to be for them to be able to coach, for them to be able to do those things. A lot of them can still coach, a lot of them can still be involved in administration work, so we need to provide education for them. Coaching is very expensive, so if a player of that has served that long, we need to allow them to go for training for either a very minimal fees or for free. I think for free. They need to be able to go for coaching courses for free, because ultimately you cannot, in life, you don't care where you are, you cannot depend on people giving you money. It never works. You have to teach somebody to be self-reliant, right?
With all said and done, Sammy Kempes is going for the top seat in football administration. The Football Kenya Federation presidency, for he believes he is the right man for the job, having had his actions speak louder than words in his ventures.
I'm running for the presidency of FKF, period. I'm not looking right, left, back. I'm full steam ahead. I believe I'm the most qualified person. I don't think I'm qualified because I'm a former football player. Has nothing to do with it. It just happens that I am a former football player. If you take that out of the question, you compare me to any candidate out there, nobody is as qualified as I am. And the reason I say that is because even though I'm a player that's played at the highest level, all the way to the national team, I have years of experience in managing football at every level. At the youth level, at the professional level, I've owned a professional soccer team, I've owned a youth academy, I have developed soccer facilities of tremendous magnitudes. So I've created infrastructure, I have run leagues, I have run tournaments, and they have been very successful. It's not just that I've run them very successfully. And I was also involved in developing US football from where it was to where it is today. If you go to a community in North Texas, which is the largest football community, one of the two largest, possibly the largest in the US, I'm very recognized, I'm well recognized and well respected because of my contribution to the community. I think for me, if you look at all that's needed in this country, the infrastructure, the sound management that's needed, integrity, which people ask me, how can we trust you? Former presidents say the same things. And my reminder to people is, don't judge me with what I say, judge me with what I've done. Again, I challenge anybody to go to the community I come from and ask them about my integrity. Hear what they say about me. That's my predictor of what I'm gonna do in the future. For me, we have to bring integrity, we have to bring accountability, and then we have to bring the experience to bear. I have all these things. I don't think you can look back at an election in the past and find a person who has the level of experience and preparedness for a position like I have.
And that is why he wants her to be given the opportunity to change the narrative in Kenya, urging all to choose wisely when that time comes.
My parting shot to Kenyans is, football is an amazing sport. You know, I am a living example of what football can do to an individual or a young person. I always tell people football can change lives. You know, lives of individuals. It can change the life of a community. It can build communities. It can build economies. Football has tremendous power, you know, to lift the psyche of a nation. And so Kenya is losing on an opportunity that is available, that could be available to us. So what I ask people, especially all the stakeholders of football, is to ask themselves, we have an opportunity right now, in a very long time, we have an opportunity to change the course of our football. And we can take a turn for the better, and we can take football to greater heights. And my plea to them is think really hard of the decisions you're making, because the decision in terms of who you choose to become the president will have a tremendous impact for a long period of time. Let's not just complain about it. For the first time, I'm urging people, stakeholders, to make the right decision you make the wrong decision because maybe you get money, but you suffer for 4 years. So my plea to you is I'm passionate about football. This is my life, literally, and I'm I'm praying that I get the opportunity to be able to be part of that process of changing football.